Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Fred Johnson from the Straz Center for the Performing Arts here with Miss Susan Magasamen from Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland. Welcome to this edition of the Art and Mind Village Chat. We're excited to be here with you again as we kick off our new season of conversation about art and the importance of art in the health and well-being of each of us as individuals and the community at large, and ultimately globally, the importance of art and creativity. So happy to be here with one of our founding members of our Art and Mind Village chat team, Mr. John Parks, choreographer, dancer extraordinaire. We're so honored to have you with us, John. Thank you. We're happy to have you here this season and very excited to have as our artist presented this edition of the Art and Mind Village Chat, Mr. David Deblinger, artist, writer, director, teacher, magnificent. Really, really have you, David. Welcome to the Art and Mind Village Chat. You know, Susan, I thought we'd start out by giving an opportunity to kind of share what this experience is all about. For those of you who are with us for the very first time, welcome. For those of you who have been with us before, welcome back. And we just want to really kind of re-emphasize the joy and the importance of the work that we're doing together. I'll start by saying that the Straz Center, the David A. Straz Center for the Performing Arts in Tampa, Florida, is the largest performing arts center in the southeastern United States, committed to the full measure of presenting art in our 5 amazing theaters, as well as offering education for both young people and adults at our Patel Conservatory for the Performing Arts that is housed and an integral part of the Straz Center experience. And one of the really, really important conversations that we started several years ago, actually in 2017, we started this conversation with Susan, who we had the great opportunity to hear her speak at a forum, which kind of was an overarching forum about the importance of art in commerce, in the regional financial benefits of the arts, and also in our science and health community, as well as just an overarching conversation about the importance of arts. And Susan began a journey with us to really understand the importance of the science and research that many of us as artists have felt in our bones when we perform. And this is something that we'll talk with David about today. But we were able to create at the Straz Center a bona fide arts and health and healing initiative so that we could engage with the science and research community to quantify and to build a broader understanding of the importance of art, both as an entertainment and aesthetic component, but also as a very, very important part of our health and well-being, our wellness, our community. And so I called Susan up on the phone after hearing her speak, after I'd spoken with the president, and said, I really want to have a conversation with Susan about the work that she's doing and see if there was an opportunity for collaboration. And so Susan, please share with us the magnificent work that you all do at Johns Hopkins.
Oh, well, thank you, Fred. It's an honor to work with you and your team. And it's hard to believe that it's been 5 years. I mean, that just blows me away. As you were talking, I had this idea of, to me, the arts are, well, first of all, the artists have always known the power of healing and well-being in all of these different forms that we call art. The integration or the sort of offering to bring science or research into the arts in service of health and well-being is a little bit to me like understanding, how the sun works, how the sun shines. And, it's gorgeous in and of itself. It casts light, it feels good. We don't really need to know more, but if we did, we could harness the sun. We could create solar energy. We could use that in all kinds of ways to light lights and warm rooms and help us in lots of different ways. And I think that knowing more about how the arts and aesthetic experiences work from a psychological and a physiological point of view, just gives us some new knowledge to play with and to riff on and to get better at using it to help us. And I'll just give a couple of examples. We know now that movement and dance really helps people with Parkinson's move better and have better mood and have a higher quality of life. We know that music is so important for people with Alzheimer's and dementia. And while it is not a cure for those diseases, we think that it can stay off some of the cognitive decline and can certainly increase, reduce frustration and anxiety, increase memory and connection to each other. We also know that things like theater and improv can help us in the way that we take perspective and have compassion and empathy and see ourselves and others at a lower risk. So there's many things that we know about where in the brain different things happen. Another, I think, interesting point to make is that the arts, unlike any other thing we know about, uses multiple systems, engages multiple mechanisms and different parts of the brain at the same time. That's really cool. And so, our work at Hopkins isn't to harness the sun. It's to really try to bring some new knowledge to each other and to work interdisciplinarily. So we're never going to solve these problems alone. We're never going to address pain and suffering one at a time, but if we can come together and put all of our ideas together and figure out how might we address something that is as simple as helping someone walk better, or reduce stress or anxiety, or address help someone soothe the pain of sexual assault or trauma, that's good enough for me. So that's kind of what we work on, and we do it across all art forms. Work with lots of every discipline that wants to work with us, we'll work with them. And we also do a lot of work in field building, because the reality is while the arts are everywhere, there is not enough policy and there's not enough funding to really support the amazing work that the arts and aesthetic experiences, and by aesthetic experiences, I mean all the sensory systems, but also design and architecture and the way we think about spaces. So yeah, that's what we think about.
That's great. And, I love using the term of really integrating and understanding the relativity of all of those things, and how they're encompassed in the experiences that we have through the art, whether we're viewing it or whether we're doing it. And I can honestly say that I don't think I've ever experienced someone who brings all of that sensory experience, the emotional experience, the attention and the connection better than David Deblinger. David, it's so great to have the opportunity to have you be here with us today. I thankfully have had the opportunity to see you perform, and I've had the opportunity to perform in support of the work that you do. So we welcome you for your expertise. We thank you for all that you give every day, because I can tell you that David Deblinger is someone who gives 170%, 365 days of the year to the dedication of his work. So welcome to this conversation. Welcome to an opportunity to really kind of share examples of the power of this magnificent piece of art that you created called Lucky Penny. But I'd be interested to ask the question, but how did it all start? Like, how did David Deblinger end up being an artist? How did you end up doing this thing that you do?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. Again, I'm so honored and really excited to be here and to learn and continue to learn from the work that you're doing, Susan. But I'm try to be brief. I'm from Queens originally, and I grew up there. And I got involved just really in the house because my mom was a comedian when she was young. She was born in 1926, actually, and my father was born in 1928. And my mother started performing at a young age, doing comedy, stand-up comedy, and telling stories and sort of long form storytelling. And my father was an accountant, but he, they both had difficult childhoods. My father in particular, unfortunately, he both his parents suffered from mental illness and were in and out of facilities. So my father had a lot of challenges growing up. And ever since I was growing, even though he wasn't professionally involved with the entertainment industry during my lifetime, he was constantly with the accents. What are you doing over there? He was just constantly, and it was like, I think in some ways a coping mechanism for him. He was always playing and always constantly joking around, and to at some points it would drive me a little bit crazy, because when I would try to talk about something serious or something dramatic, he'd be like, don't worry about it. He was just constantly like this energy that was so over the top that I was like, oh, he's crazy, he's nutty. And actually, to be honest, we had a lot of like many fathers and sons do, we had a lot of conflicts. But anyway, we also played a lot. And when video cameras came out, when I was a kid, we were always making little scenes and sketches. And honestly, one thing I hated was school. I was very anxious about grades and tests. And when I was in junior high school, I found out about a specialized high school in Manhattan called the High School of Performing Arts at the time. And what I also found out about that school was that it was vocational, meaning half the day was not school. In my mind, it was acting, if that's what you auditioned and got in to be part of. So I was like, no school half the day. And I ended up auditioning for this school that was in Manhattan. So it would take an hour and a half to get there. And I got in, believe it or not. I auditioned, I got in, and I went there. And in my junior year there, I ended up getting into a special program called the Bus and Truck Company. And the director of that program, I didn't know it at the time, but he had studied with some incredible theater practitioners, one in particular by the name of Jerzy Grotowski. And he had done all this stuff and around the word ensemble. And within that word, the word trust. And when I got into this little group in my junior year that I was going to be in all year, he made a big deal about trust among these teenagers, there's 12 teenagers, physical trust. Like at any second when we were walking in the hallway, you had to be ready that somebody, if your castmate was next to you, you'd be walking in the hall and suddenly they would just be like, ah! And they would jump into your arms and you would just have to be able to catch them. And for me, from Queens, and it was, co-ed, that was very exciting, and and then not just physical trust, but emotional. And what we did together in that group was we happened to be creating a show together based on our own experiences. And the theme was getting picked on for being different in some way. And this is New York City, so obviously it's a quite a diverse group of teenagers. But what would happen is, like in that room when I was whatever 16, 17, people would get up and share a moment inspired by that theme, and the room would get really quiet, and we would hear each other. And we would listen. And we created a little show and toured it, and based on our experiences. I'm not going to say it was like the most amazing, you know, it was a piece called, I think it was called No Hard Feelings. And we toured it around to junior high schools, but that year changed my life. I ended up going to a college called Wesleyan University in Connecticut, and I ended up creating a major there based on my work with that gentleman. And the major focused on drama and education. It was called Education of the Urban Poor through Theater. And it was sort of taking the idea of a classroom, an ensemble, a student, an actor, and then cognitive, rational abilities, intuitive, creative abilities. And I ended up creating a piece with some local teenagers that weren't probably that much younger than me in Middletown, Connecticut. And anyway, that was a challenging experience. They had never acted before, and there was some controversial issues they happened to all be African-American, and but I was thrilled, and I left that school and came to New York, started acting professionally, doing work in the community. And we call it teaching artist work. I'm sure you guys, of course, are familiar with that. And one gig I got as a teaching artist after college was working with some incarcerated youth in New Jersey. And they had gone through a playwriting workshop where they'd written small short pieces, often about how they got incarcerated. But often the pieces would also include some kind of like magic or even like science fiction sometimes. So it would be like, yo, 5-0, we gotta go. What's that in the sky? Oh shit, it's a saucer. What? It's a flying saucer. Yo, will you help us? Yes, we will help you. Okay. And the kids, they would get saved by the aliens or whatever. And anyway, we worked on these little pieces that the youth had written. And then we would, present them in a staged reading at the facility where they were incarcerated in New Jersey. And these kids, I don't know if many of them had ever experienced, actors coming, acting in their short plays. And some of them seemed really, I'm assuming some of them were quite traumatized themselves through experiences that they had growing up. But when they got up on the stage and received a little certificate, and there was applause, some of these kids who were really hard, really tough, they would come and they would get the certificate and they'd be like, it was kind of deep. And anyway, I met two gentlemen, actors, doing that. They were also from New York. They were of Puerto Rican ancestry, and we became very close friends. These two actors and I, and they had an idea to start something. They didn't even call it a theater company at the time. But the idea was spurred by, at the time, there was a play on Broadway called Death and the Maiden, and they hired a white man to play a Latino role. And when asked why in the New York Times, the producers said, we couldn't find one. So these two gentlemen, John Ortiz and Gary Perez, were like, couldn't find one. I don't want to curse, but anyway, they were like, forget that. And they, let's start a home for Latinos. And let's get David to start it with us. I was like, home for Latinos? Vamos a ver, let's go. I mean, I happen to speak Spanish because I was in Spain and whatever. I had a Puerto Rican girlfriend actually growing up. And anyway, and we started this mostly Latino group with a couple of exceptions. And we just, and that stuff I worked on in college. And one of the reasons they asked me to start with them was because of, I think, this ensemble building experiences I had. And we did, and we met every week. And we started developing new work. And it became a company. And we auditioned folks, but we were young and we partied together so much and got really tight. and we had very talented people involved. So people flew off start right away to do a movie with Al Pacino and then come back. And then we went back to this space we had on 53rd and 10th that was rat infested, and we would work for 3 hours. And then somebody would, while we were working, these were actors, but somebody would be like, take out their private journal and say, I'd like to read something. And they would read something really personal that was almost felt like too personal. And we'd all be quiet. And then we'd be like, somebody would be like, that's a play. And we'd be like, let's do it. How are we going to do it? I don't know. We got to raise money. Let's have a party and sell beer. That's illegal. Don't worry about it. And we would just develop something, and we'd start presenting, and it just kept going. And then I started creating stuff. There's a great actor named John Leguizamo, who is a Latino gentleman, and he was at the very beginning of our company. He was friends with folks, and I had seen his plays doing different characters, and I started doing the same. I started creating characters, and I was drawn to very dark and, to be honest, funny but sad type stories. And one piece I did, I actually tape recorded a lot of homeless folks, a lot of people living on the street, and I listened 1,000 times to the recordings, and I transcribed, and certain things that I transcribed, I was like, oh my God, I was like just very impressed and interested, and sort of. So anyway, I started creating work, and that led eventually, years later, to Lucky Penny.
And that's a perfect segue, because one of the most powerful elements in this powerful piece is the many characters that you do create. The interesting thing about your journey, I think, David, is that at a very, very early age, you really you've always been one to kind of listen to and feel the essence of characters. What makes a person full and whole. I remember once we were having a conversation, and I talked about one of the amazing things about the theater is that it affords an opportunity for us to create, beauty, to remind people of the importance of beauty and how beautiful life can be. And you said, yeah, and the not so beautiful as well, an opportunity to see both and to really parallel both. So I've really just, I've been taken by your ability to kind of live into the depth of that. So a lot of your early work was around understanding the power of truth and trust and ensemble and working together and giving people the opportunity for their voice to be heard. In this particular piece, Lucky Penny, let's start to take a journey with that, because this kind of, for me, was really, really important. This whole journey with you and your dad, and his walk through dementia, an experience that I had years ago with my mom that was very difficult for me because I didn't know much about it. And one of the things that I really felt so empowered about is being able to, through Lucky Penny, learn about dementia, learn about the experience that my mom had, that no medical doctor or nurse or anybody in the care world had ever shared with me. My job was just to make her comfortable, find a place where she can be comfortable, where she won't hurt herself. But I didn't know what was going on. And so for me, that's one of the elements that is a plus and an additive to this journey. So why don't you take us on begin this journey with Lucky Penny, and talk about the first scene that we're going to have the opportunity to be, but just kind of give an overview of what's Lucky Penny about.
Absolutely. So I just left off, and I was saying that I started creating a work, and I actually had some, as an actor in New York, some exciting business stuff happen when I did that early stuff. But and some of it had to do with, like, there was a show called In Living Color many years ago, sort of these variety shows. But again, my sort of what I seemed to be drawn to is the kinds of work and characters and stories that can be, I think, can often be quite funny, but then like 5 seconds later, very not funny, like quite sad. and then go on this ride. And it's sort of my, I guess what you call my aesthetic, whatever. So I didn't really fit very well into that always funny. So anyway, but I did a bunch of shows, and a young man, part of this company, which the name became Labyrinth, in 1995 is when we took that name. There was a young man who joined the company later. He came to the company when he was 17, and he saw some of those early shows. And then later on, good 10, 15 later, he became a member of the company. And we have a thing called our summer intensive where we can present something new. And he liked my early shows a lot. And he was like, why don't you do a new show? And at the time, unfortunately, my father, I guess you might say, was dying. And I wasn't quite in the mood because that was on my mind. And he said, let's go to the beach. And we went, and we went to the beach, and he was like, tell me a bunch of stories. Tell me all the stories. And I told a bunch of stories about my dad. I told other stories. And he wrote down like a list. And he created a little narrative. But the narrative that he created on one level could be described as, my father got sick and died. And I was like, who wants to come see that? And he's like, if it's smart and if it's funny too, let's work on it. And so we made this list. And again, at this theater called Labyrinth, everybody was encouraged to write, even if that wasn't your, hat or whatever. So we got together and we started working on, and then I had met a gentleman, a world-class jazz vocalist and healer a couple of years before. And I was like, and this young man's name was Ben. I was like, Ben, maybe we can ask Fred to help us. And he says, who's Fred? I was like, let me introduce you. And so we engaged with Fred Johnson to come up with some standards, and we started working together. And the first clip I'm going to show you from this piece, Lucky Penny, that I decided to start the piece with, the piece ended up, I guess you might say, fortunately, when my dad went through this experience of dementia, a number of times he woke up in response to things it seemed as if that I was doing. And as opposed to starting like at the chronological beginning, there was this one time he woke up that was very much on my mind, because he hadn't been around for a while, and suddenly he woke up. And so we started the piece with this moment. And besides that, I'll say, I am not a singer at all, especially compared to a world-class singer. But I had heard that Albert Einstein mentioned, actually it was my father that told me that when I was a kid, that Einstein had said something about time itself being an insistent illusion, and that the past, the present, and the future are all happening. And I liked that idea. So while I was walking in Prospect Park in Brooklyn, I made up this song, and anyway, I'm almost embarrassed, but that's what the thing begins with. And then there's this moment. So I guess, and I call this clip of Lucky Penny a story within a story. Maybe we could jump to the clip now. Is that okay, Fred?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yesterday, wait for tomorrow. Does yesterday dream up tomorrow? Does yesterday speak of tomorrow? My father can no longer communicate because he has dementia. So I go to the facility where he lives, and
And my mother, who is well, is on one side of him, and an aide is on the other, and my dad's in the middle like this. So I decided to tell him a couple of stories about dogs, because, we both love dogs. So I actually tell him a story that he had told me from his childhood. He said he heard a dog getting beaten viciously in a house or apartment, and he runs over there, bangs on his door. The door flies open, and my dad, as a little boy, looks up at this man. He says, "You don't want that dog. Let me have it." The man says, "Fine, take her." Throws the dog at my father. My father takes this dog home, ties it up outside, goes inside to tell his mother. His mother, "He's the in the hint with the dog. I got a dirty boy. I don't need a filthy dog. Get out of here." Then, supposedly, his father comes home, and without knowing anything, he sees the dog tied up outside, unties it, brings it in, and they kept her. Called a salad. So I'm telling this story, and my mother's like, "Oh yeah, Jack, you remember the story? Jack, remember the story? Remember the story?" And the aide is like, and my father's like this. So then I think I said another story about the dog we had growing up, Biscuit. And then I said something funny. I don't remember what. At the exact moment that my mother and this aide laughed, my dad is like, and I'm like startled. I'm like, yeah, you love dogs. I know you, Daddy, you love dogs, right? Don't you? And my father's like, "Yes, I do." He hadn't spoken in months.
I'm wild again, beguiled again, a simpering, whimpering child again, bewitched, bothered, and bewildered am I couldn't sleep, I wouldn't sleep till I could sleep where I shouldn't sleep. Bewitched, bothered, and bewildered am
That's
Yeah.
incredible. That's really incredible. It's really interesting how what comedy does in terms of bringing you in and pulling you in terms of the familiar, and unifies you with everyone else. And the sense of laughter is a common united force in an audience with a group of people where everyone is speaking that same language. And then when you bring in something that's tragic or that feels uncomfortable, it can be embraced on a deeper level. It's really fascinating. That was really incredible, really beautiful, really beautiful.
Yeah, wow. I mean, even though you set it up to talk about your dad, the way that it became so embodied is like extraordinary. And I also think there's something about comedy, like your body, you relax, right? It's funny. And then, so you're almost, you're very vulnerable. And then when you go to the tragedy, I mean, of the moment, I think you feel it because you haven't compartmentalized, you're not defended, you're actually so exposed, and it just like goes right in you in a way that back to your trust and truth, right? It's like, I'm trusting you as an actor, and then you you bring me to a place that I wouldn't have gone to, wouldn't have allowed myself to go to because of the pain. And then Fred, I think the way you come in and soothe the pain is actually quite beautiful. Like you don't leave us in pain. And I really appreciated that. Really appreciated that.
Yeah, it was really, really interesting. Just I remember early on speaking with the presenter hat now, the Performing Arts Center hat, when conversations early on started nationally about, is there an audience for this kind of work? Is talking about health challenges and things of that. Is there an audience for that? Will that turn audiences off? I mean, I think Ben's wisdom in saying to David, if it's done cleverly and if it's funny and if it's really, the experience, as you so aptly described, John, it immediately brings together our sensory, our humanity, the elements of our humanity, and lovingly and in a nurturing way, you can be taken on a journey that's not all, laughs and smiles. It's truth, it's inner truth, it's what makes us human. And for me, that was one of the most powerful things. And I used to joke with David, and I think I said to you, Susan, I mean, I had some traumatic experiences early on in my career trying to be an actor, and ended up, studying and, being a part of a national mime team, and always said, I'm not going to do Broadway. I'm not going to do New York because I hate doing the same thing the same way every night. I'm a jazz musician. I don't do that. And this journey with David every night, although the material was similar, it was so human. It was so passionate. It was so different every night. So every night felt like the very first time that we had this experience. I learned so much through this experience with you, David. Let's talk about the second clip. Let's keep the roll going with Lucky Penny. I think that's fantastic.
Thank you guys so much for these words. I'm so grateful to be here. So the second clip, I named the clips, and I called the second clip "The Power of Human Touch?" ? And in the narrative portion of Lucky Penny, and I say narrative because it's a bunch of stories, and some of which are thematically related, and then there's sort of the narrative. And this is another one dealing with the narrative, which unfortunately dealt with I'm doing a play in San Francisco, and I get a call from my mother that my father has a terrible headache or something. And this is so we go back in time before that first clip, and my mother says he's got a terrible headache. I said, well, so what? I don't know why she's calling me. And she says, nothing. I gave him some ice and some aspirin. I was like, ice? Did it help? No. I don't know. And then in the morning he wakes up, and unfortunately they took him to the hospital, and he had a stroke, and they moved to New Jersey, and he was at home, but he still was able to like walk and talk, and he was doing pretty good. Then he started having these seizures, and so he moved into what's called a transitional care unit. And it was a place that had 2 floors, and the first floor was really nice, and there's like parties and activities, and everybody's doing pretty good eating. And that's where he was. And then the second floor, which I got to check out a little bit, was terrible, and everybody was in one room. And anyway, I can't believe I'm still so emotional about this. It was a while ago, but I didn't want him to go there. So he was doing fine, but that's when we start the second clip. He's still on the first floor, and I don't want him to go to the second floor, and that's where we can start this clip. Again, the power of human touch, I called it.
And then they start testing him. Every day, these different like cognitive tests. Testing, and he starts failing. some of these deaths, and they start mentioning, I'm like, what's the, and then I hear he's not walking, and I'm like, what? I just was there, and he was walking, so I go into his room. I say, Dad, what's going on? You're not walking now? He's like, I'm like, come on, you can walk. And I just, I sit in a wheelchair, and I just like, I go, and I go like, I hug him, and I take like the back of his pants, and then I just like try to pull him up, and I put his weight onto me, like this, and then I just stand him up, like this, and I let go. And he's standing up. I'm like, Dad, you're standing up. You're standing up by yourself. Can you walk? You can walk. Can you walk? My father just goes like this. I'm like, wait a minute, get out! I go call the social worker, and they come in the room. I'm like, Dad, could you do please what? Show them that you can walk. And he just goes like this. He's like, and he's just walking all over the room. He's walking. I'm like, hey, that's not a second floor guy over there. That guy. And he goes right up to the bathroom. He puts his hand on the door, looks right at the social worker, looks at me, opens the door, goes into the bathroom, shuts the door. I'm like, yeah. And they're like, how did you do it? I said, no, I just held him. And then my mother shows up, and he's in there for a long time. So we're waiting, and then you're like, okay, Dad, what's going on in there? And we open the door, and he's sitting on the toilet, and his diapers are at his ankles, but he looks up, and it's him. I mean, his expression, he's like, he's just like, he does that, and he does what he always would do. He just starts making up a song, and he's just like, beautiful family in my heart and my soul. I gave them everything I could. We're like, yeah! My father says, thank you.
Beautiful family in my heart and soul. I gave them everything. I gave them everything I could.
Wow.
You're killing us, man. Wow. I mean, I know the second floor. I've had family on the second floor. Yeah. And isn't it like such a moral dilemma, right? It's like, because you're the protector and you fight like hell. I'm actually in a fight right now to get somebody off the second floor. And once you go to the second floor, it's very hard to get off the second floor. And it's really, really tough. And in some ways, the second floor makes everything worse, because you're, like that kind of walking that you just described doesn't cut it right on the first floor, usually, right? They're like, well, it's walking, but it's not really walking. And the rules are so warped about what it means to be human, and how you treat people on the second floor changes too, right? They're not treated like people. They're moved around, and it's a whole commentary on what it means to be human and how to treat each other.
Yeah, and I think that, that's really at the core of it. It's what it means to be human.
Yeah.
What it means to be human is really at the very basis of why creative expression is so powerfully dynamic. It cuts away, it's that old thing that we've talked about. It cuts away from what the mind thinks, and it drops into what the heart can feel and what the mind can remember. And that is just what's so amazing. I mentioned earlier, oh, go ahead, David, you're going to say something.
I was just wanted to, because, I'm not sure about this, scientifically, of course, but I just wanted to mention that, that place he was in at that time, it was a corporate owned place that, I guess they have chains of them. And And I wanted to mention that the human beings working at that place, there were some human beings, I'm talking about aides and who were really sweet and really nice, but there also were, I don't know, large contingent, but there are also some who, at least from my perspective, it just didn't feel like they cared about him.
You know,
But then we moved him because of it's a long story, but to another place that was a privately owned place. And it happened to be a very religious owners, ultra-Orthodox Jewish, that's a whole nother story. But anyway, and for some reason, like there was a way, at least from my perspective, and this is totally anecdotal, so many people at that other place, the smaller place, the privately owned place, I just felt like they cared. And I'll quickly tell you just one other thing, I'm not going to show you a clip, but you can see where the piece is going, and one place it goes that Fred actually played, this is a clip I'm not going to show you, but you would think that getting a voicemail about, in the middle, you wake up in the morning, you get a voicemail, and the person on the voicemail is telling you that your father has died. You would think that would be a terrible way to find out that your father died. But because the voicemail came from this very specific human being, this aide at that second place who was so loving and so caring, and even in the voicemail, he was like, "Hey, Miss David, I just want to tell you, I'm so sorry. I just want to tell you, we just got the thing. I just was trying to clean him up." And it was like the greatest way to find out. And the arts and acting, and I believe art is about the heart. It is about personal connection. And a reason, being connected to a movement, to a story, to a person. And I just thought that was interesting. And I couldn't have had a better person to play the person than somebody who I also happen to love very much, which is Fred Johnson. Anyway, I'm sorry to add another whole clip telling you about it.
No, that's great. That's great. That's great. So what are we going to see next?
So the next one I call drama as education. And really this one relates to what you mentioned earlier, Fred, about yourself learning a little bit about something that unfortunately your mother went through that was the same particular disease. And it is housed in this clip. And the last thing I'll say about it is that, I learned about what a palliative physician is during this process. And I'll also mention that for the clip is to tell you is that I have a brother who became an ultra-Orthodox Jew, and we, in a family of atheists, basically. We are all Jewish, but my brother became, so when we were called to have a meeting with a palliative physician, we didn't know whether my brother would start davening or start being chata. I don't know. We were just nervous about what he was going to do with this position. And anyway, that's a good intro to this clip.
Very good.
We're all waiting for this palliative physician. It's my mother, myself, my wife, Tomoko, my sister, her husband, and my brother who's there with a black, suit and a hat and a beard, and very, very serious, and his wife with the wig. And when we're all waiting, look at my brother, he's very, very serious. And then we see down the hall this tall, very handsome guy with hair down to here, jeans and sandals. He comes walking down the hall. He's like, "Oh, hey guys, how you doing?" "Ooh, a lot of you guys. Okay. All right. Let's go to the conference room." All right. So we go, and we're looking at this guy, looking at my brother. My brother's walking to the conference room, okay, what's he gonna do? Is he gonna start doing something to this guy? So we get into the conference room. We all sit down, and the palliative physician looks at all of us and says, "Okay, first of all, I want to say clearly, Jack has a lot of love." And I'm looking at this guy, and I'm like, I I don't like this guy. And then he goes on to say, okay, so your dad has Lewy body dementia. That's why he's contracting and losing a lot of his musculature. And now swallowing has become an issue. So that's why he gets pneumonia, because the food goes down into his lungs and catches bacteria. So really this meeting is about one question, one choice. Either we insert a feeding tube into your father's abdomen, or we don't. My brother shifts in his chair. And the doctor says, and even if we do put the tube in, he can still get pneumonia. And, we should say now, and please, we should mention something about your dad's quality of life. Now my brother is glaring at the doctor. My sister is glaring at my brother, and my mother is kind of smiling at the doctor because I think she thinks he's very handsome. and then the doctor says, I should add that the feeding tube is very, 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 very expensive. There's a pause. My brother stands up and we're like, okay, here it comes, what's he gonna do? But my brother stands up, he says, doctor, just wanted to ask you one thing. So if you don't put the feeding tube into my father, you're just gonna starve him? I go to my father's room. Now he's like frozen. He can't walk, can't talk. TV blaring, his mouth open like this. And I go into his room. And I just whisper in his ear. I'm like, Dad, we're all okay. We're all fine. If you want to go, you can go. But if you want to hang around a couple more months, I haven't told anybody this then, but it's finally happened. Goes pregnant, I'm gonna be a father. Dad, it's a boy. And he didn't wake up, his eyes didn't clear or anything like this, but he did. He did move his head. And he looked at me.
Every time it rains, pennies from heaven. Don't you know each cloud contains pennies from heaven? You'll find your fortune falling all over town. Make sure your umbrella is upside down. Whoa, save it for a package of sunshine and flowers. If you want the things you love, you must have showers. So when you hear it thunder, don't run under a tree. There'll be pennies from heaven for you and me. There'll be pennies from heaven, pennies from heaven, pennies from heaven for you and me. What a better day,
For me, it's really fascinating how collective memories, memories that we have about the past, and how the present taps into that and takes you back. It takes you back and connects you with memories and relationships and family and love and emotions, and it's a real strong tool. And the arts creates an atmosphere, creates a palette for those memories to exchange itself. I was thinking, Susan, what you was talking about in terms of how the arts and some of the arts really engage the mind in many different ways. So it's just not one pathway, but it connects the synapses between the right and the left hemisphere. But it engages so much of you, of your mind and your body and your remembrances. And so I'm just really fascinated. I'm really touched by this presentation, because it just brings up a lot of memories for me in terms of it. And experiences that I have not been, this particular experience I've not been through, but it just adds up. You know how we always fill up the gaps. You know, we hear you say every other word, and we, as a human being, we fill those gaps in with our own perception of that. You know, and it's really just really incredible. This is, you know, it's, I don't know what to say. It just brings up the power of the arts.
You know, when he was, when you were, your physicality on the stage, like when you were being your father, and the way that you turned your head and your eyes glared out and your mouth was open, I think no matter who is in the audience, and this is John, to your point, I think that we can relate to that, losing someone losing themselves, to both how we perceive it and how they're perceiving it, yet they're still picking up something. So, you know, something like a new life, you know, that, and they're giving all, everything, the cognitive load is so high, they're giving everything, but the way that you physically moved your body, I think also triggers us without, you know, you didn't, and then there are certain phrases that you use that I think are universally true, phrasing that triggers memories also that might not be about dementia, but certainly end of life and these moral, the family, right? You know, who's gonna like embarrass me, or who's gonna say the wrong thing, or there's still this old grudge going on, and then you've got this palliative care guy who basically is just like Jesus, you know, in a weird way. And all those dynamics we all have. So, you know, when you come to this experience, you're tapping into all these wounds and that are yours, and you're also hearing your story. And so it's very powerful physiologically to see that and hear those different aspects that we all have. I mean, there's so much universal truth in this, even though it's a story about Alzheimer's, it's a story about a lot of things. So,
And this is the stuff that great art is made of.
mhm.
You go to the theater, you go into that controlled space, and you're taken on a journey. So what we have the opportunity to do is to really experience the power of acting, the power of theater, you know, and this is what I love about this season. And again, I'm so honored and so happy, David, that we're able to really share Lucky Penny in this kind of tribute to the power of theater as a real pathway to take a journey of understanding emotion, health, healing, caregiving. You know, what it's a powerful caregiver story. And as both John, you and Susan have said, you know, we all have experiences in our life where it may not be dementia, it may be something else, but the essence of the way the body feels, the way the mind feels, the way the heart, you know, this was just, it's such a powerful heart journey. So it's the best of the pure talent and technique of theater being utilized to tell a story that's universal in so many ways, but that's informative. I mean, literally, in the last days of my mom's life, struggling with dementia, it was all about a feeding tube, and that putting that feeding tube into my mom was the last. It was kind of, that was the beginning of the end of her journey, because taste and food was a big thing for her, and she got pneumonia a couple of times prior to that. So there was so much that I learned, and so there was so much specific commonality. It was like, I remember a few times during the course of working on the piece going, gosh, I wish I had known that. I wish I had known that. If I had known that, I wouldn't have felt so guilty about feeling like I couldn't do anything, you know? So again, it's if we take a look at our seasons, you know, coming together with the artist's perspective, the science and research perspective, and then now having this experience and being moved, this is why it's so important for the general public to understand that the theater, that artistic expression is such a powerful pathway to enrich our humanity and to deepen us into really understanding the power of the arts, to help us to heal, to come into a common place. What's your fourth clip? Let's listen.
Oh,
Watch
here
the
it
full
is.
clip.
So I call it the precious moment. And I just, you know, a little bit of a sidebar. I'm in love with inviting people, and it started. It was hinted at from both John and Susan. I'm in love with inviting people in settings to share moments. And you know, it's funny when people share a moment. There's no lying. If something meant something to you, it meant something to you, even if you're not remembering exactly what happened. That's not even the point. Anyway, this is an example of a moment during the birth of my son that was pivotal, and I call the clip from Lucky Penny the precious moment.
My wife goes into labor, and it is the most terrifying thing of my life, because every time she has like a big contraction, there's this heart monitor, and it shoots, the baby's heart shoots down. And we have this really great Buddhist-y Jew, tall obstetrician. He's been excellent, and he's, you know, and he's trying to make the heart, you know, better, and it's better, worse, better, worse. And then I see in his eyes that it's time, and he calls for his nurse. And she's busy with another delivery, and he looks at me, and I'm like, and he tells me just to go and put Tomoko's you know, arm around my shoulder, and then take her by the leg, and he gets in between her legs, and then there's a guy who's like the head doctor, and he goes away from Tomoko and I for a second, and he lowers his voice, and he says to this head doctor, and I hear, and I get so fucking scared. And I'm standing there, and he's like, okay, Tomoko, you're doing fine, Just gonna wait for the contraction. Here we go. Here's the contraction, and Tomoko, and punch! But Tomoko's doing it, and the baby starts coming out. She's like, okay, and punch! The baby comes, and he cuts her down there a little bit. Comes out, the umbilical cord is twice wrapped around the baby's neck, but he unravels it quickly. And this boy is healthy. This boy is perfect. So, you know, I don't know why. My father woke up for me. A lot of times, you know, in San Francisco with the picking up of the thing and then the singing. He didn't do that for my sister, my brother, my mother, the nurses. He did it for me. And every time he did, for the first time in my life, I felt like a hero. You know, I don't know, he always had something going with me. I don't know if it was because I was the youngest, but he'd be like, it's you! It's you! He'd come on and say, don't you know how much I love you? You know how much I love you? I was like, I don't want to know! I don't want to know! So last year, I lost my father, and I became now I know how much he loved me. Does yesterday wait for tomorrow? Does yesterday dream up tomorrow? Does yesterday speak? Does yesterday wait for tomorrow? Fred Johnson, yesterday.
Yeah, what a wonderful experience. Thank you, David, for allowing me to be a part of it. And full disclosure, I did not pick Lucky Penny because I was involved in it. It was one of the greatest moments of my life to have an experience that I had really not ever had before. I had not ever done a theatrical presentation like that before. I'd been involved as a, singer, performer, and certainly acted in other contexts. But it really was a walk into an experience of art speaking to the heart about healing, about our humanity. It was just really, it has become a real model for me when I go out into the world now and really advocate to folk, and to have the great blessing and opportunity to learn from Susan and all of the research work that she and her colleagues do. So David, thank you so much. As you continue to do your work with ensemble force and things of this nature, what kind of in as we wrap up, what would you like to say to that world out there that we're advocating to about the importance of art and health and healing?
The maybe a couple things. One is, one of the clips, not this one, the one before. I don't know if you got that, but there was like a big disagreement between my siblings and I. My brother's an ultra-Orthodox Jew, so as far as I can understand, he really doesn't want to like let people go. Meanwhile, my sister's like, he's suffering. He wouldn't want to be here. Let him go. What are you talking about? Blah, blah, blah. And to me, to live questions and not necessarily answer them in our work as artists, but explore the nuance and the feelings behind tough questions without thinking, no, you're wrong, I'm right, you're right. But just with love, exploring the truth. And then the other thing, is this thing that I often talked about particularly the theater, as opposed to what we're doing now on a screen, although we are live. But when you walk into a theater and you watch a play, everybody's live. So it's a weird thing to say, but you're actually not totally, nobody's totally sure if everybody's going to leave. So there's something almost, I would say, sacred about people coming together and listening. And not just the performer, but the people, just people sitting next to each other and listening and thinking. And like John and actually all three of you have been talking about, and then having their own experience. And sometimes after shows, we have talks where people can share their own stories, because everybody's got them. So I believe strongly that theater can help transcend, I want to say, the ego and wanting to be right, to allow people to just exist and share what matters to them. And so I'm so excited about being here and continuing with that kind of work. And last thing I'll just say, to me, to have Fred behind me, and to the right, while we were rehearsing, I was doing the show like this, and I was like telling him the stories, and my director was like, "No, David, you can't do that. You can't look at Fred." I said, "What are you talking about?" Because it was just to have the kind of talent that I'm sure you guys know that exists in Fred Johnson was insane to me, and I felt so grateful. But anyway, I look forward to collaborating with Fred for the rest of my life, and I'm so excited to be here. And thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amazing. When you just talking about these big questions, it made me think about we all have different beliefs, and we don't often allow other people to have different beliefs because we want them to have our beliefs, right? And in some ways, what the palliative care physician said is exactly true. Your father was so loved, but loved loved differently by different people, and we don't often allow for that, right? And I think opening that up is another really amazing gift that you brought here. Is love looks different, it feels different. So thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
So great. Thank you
Yes,
so much.
for me, David, we need to talk because I'm also a graduate of PA. And some of those experiences resonate very much with me in terms of just a mindset. You know, I mean, I kind of I grew up also in the Lower East Side, and went to Yiddish theater, and you know, and so it's very kind of familiar with me. So when I talk about memories, those are the things that I'm kind of reflecting on. And it's just, I mean, the arts is just such a wholesome environment that gives the audience options and other ways of thinking about things and other connections with other people. And so thank you, David. I really appreciate what you did, and the work that you've been doing, your life's work that you've been doing. It's really incredible. Thank you
so much. I'd love to connect Fred through you. Perhaps I could get his email or whatever, and because I'd love to talk to you at some point soon, whenever.
Right.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Well, listen, thanks to you all. Again, David Deblinger, thank you. John Parks, thank you always for being here with us and really helping us to shape this journey. Susan, always a great thanks to you for being our guide and for really awakening us to understand the importance of amplifying this conversation. And our thanks to both Johns Hopkins University and the Straz Center for the Performing Arts for giving us the opportunity to provide this forum for you as we continue our journey about the importance of art as a modality for health and well-being. So on behalf of us all, and be looking out for the ensemble force to continue to touch the world, and for the great artistry of David Deblinger. A fantastic way to kick off our third season. I'm Fred Johnson. Until we meet again, be safe, stay strong, and continue to create. Take care, my friends.